Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to, this is going to be our first episode on Blasphemers Bible. We're literally just doing a Bible study for a while. You know, I've done a years-long reading of the Qur'an, and so now we're going to turn back to the books that it was based on. And I have an assembled crew with me right now that my first guest, Lawrence Yufa, a friend of mine, an activist from a long time ago, who decided to go on to become an actual Bible scholar, and he's well on his way to doing that. So very proud of him. And he's going to be co-hosting, kind of as a regular on every one of these, and that's why we're in a new time slot today, because he does another Bible study later on this afternoon. We'll put a link in the description, so if you want to go check that out. And Lawrence, would you tell us why we're not going to focus on the King James version of the Bible today?
So I think when it comes to biblical studies, you should never. You can use the KJV to like compare translations, I guess, but it should not be like the authoritative version, because there are so many textual issues with it. It was based on much later manuscripts, and it is, textually speaking, just far worse than other ones that we have, modern ones, because modern ones, they tend to actually take into account a whole plethora of manuscripts that we've discovered. The KJV, the translators of it didn't really have access to that, so it's just not a good idea to be reading from a version like that unless you are comparing it against other versions. And
you realize how many Texas preachers are reeling against that statement?
That's totally fine. They can be wrong all they want. KJV onlyists, they're just awful. They have no idea what they're talking about.
I used to be one.
That's ridiculous.
All right, so we should run through some introductions. Lawrence, please introduce yourself first, and then we'll move on to the other ones.
All right, great. Well, my name is Lawrence Yufa. I have a channel called Milwaukee Atheists. It is not very good, but on there you will find our weekly Bible studies. We also, we're actually starting John today, so we're getting there. We also have a Friday show where we read apocryphal works. We have read if you guys have never read the Alphabet of Ben Sira, you should read that. We've read the Alphabet of Ben Sira, 1st and 2nd Enoch, 3rd Enoch 2 as well. We've just read all the Apocrypha. Well, I should say, all the Apocrypha, but we're still going through all the pseudepigrapha. So it's just a fun show where we just talk about crazy interpretations. And then occasionally, when I feel like it, I come out with some big documentary style video. And I am working on one of those right now, slowly but surely. My next project is on the Suffering Servant. So if you want to see that kind of stuff, you can subscribe to Milwaukee Atheists.
Okay. All right, and then moving on, let me see. I can't read the fine print. Are you all showing up in the same order? So it's me first, then Lawrence, and then
Ben?
Yep, that's me.
Okay.
Yep, well, so my name is... Go ahead.
No, I was asking you. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, so I go by the Amateur Exegete. I'm just a lay person, a nobody. I have a website, amateurexegete.com. I have a couple podcasts. One is Bible Study for Amateurs, and basically it's just about a 10-minute podcast where we go through, right now we're going through the Epistle of Jude, and I also do a YouTube channel where I respond to apologists on a wide range of subjects, and it's a small, tiny little channel. So, but yeah, that's me.
Okay, and I see my wife has just appeared. And welcome aboard. This is the person listed as under the name S.J. Beck is in fact Lalandra Ra. That's my wife. Can you hear us, dear?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, very good. All right, and so keeping in the order that we were going through before, Lilith, what was it?
Lilith Liberated. That was my first Twitter handle. I may have quoted Christopher Hitchens, one of his more incendiary things, and had to restart my account because such things happen. But my name is Lilith. I am an ex-evangelical, former believer, former all that jazz, who memorized all the stuff like a good little child, and now I use it to destroy those who indoctrinated me. So they armed their own enemies. Oops. I am often on Peter's with believers and herding cats. I have my own channel, which I will be getting back to as soon as I get some decent equipment. So if anyone wants to shoot me a laptop that doesn't completely suck, just throwing that out there. I have also brought my infamous duct tape Bible, which, yeah, I duct taped myself out of what was once a True Love Waits Bible. And if you don't know what that is, I envy you. The summary of me. I also have a TikTok, and I'm Dark Lilith on Twitter now. So
I'm getting a bit of an echo. Lalandra, do you have headset? I've got a spare.
I'll put it on mute.
I've got a spare if you need it. Right
Okay.
here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So in the center square, we have someone not using their camera.
Yeah.
JR?
Yeah, I'm JR Eldridge. I was raised as a Christian, and after reading the Bible, stopped being a Christian. And I write parodies of Bible stories, which involves a lot of reading the Bible and trying to understand it in order to make jokes which are funny on multiple levels.
Okay. And then Derek?
Derek Lambert, Myth Vision Podcast is my YouTube channel, and I host countless academics from various schools of thought, mainly around the Bible because it's where I came out of. But I'm now venturing off into Islam and mythologies, and of course, eventually I'll be getting into Eastern religions as well. But my angle is to go to the academics who've spent countless years investigating what the sources say, going as early, as far back. Where does this come from? Where did that myth get this myth from? And, you know, on and on and on. And of course, it does kind of defang all the nonsense that we're being told. And it makes you recognize these are just ancient people with an ancient mind, with ancient ideas. And cool, we can keep that where it is and stop trying to pump this and modify it and make it somehow literally, well, they knew science before science knew, you know, all that nonsense. So there's a lot of stuff. So if you ever want to have some fun, go to Myth Vision and just check out. I've got a lot of material on there.
I would recommend, if you're going to be doing the comparative mythology, that was hugely beneficial for me.
Me too.
And we're going to be, and some of that is going to come up today. And I would also recommend, as you go into the Eastern religions, that the Bhagavad Gita was, for me, sadly disappointing. I really expected more from what I will call Hinduism, and I realize that actual Hindus will be upset at that because I'm reading the Bhagavad Gita by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is considered a cult leader. But this is the United States. This is what we think Hinduism is. This is what we get. So forgive me for that. One thing I would recommend is the Avestas of Zarathustra, because you will get to see a lot of the origins of both the independent origins of Judaism and Christianity, because Christianity borrowed different things from Zoroastrianism than Judaism did, and scholars in Judaism say that that they got more out of Zoroastrianism than any other influence. So you'll probably enjoy that. And finally, my wife, Lalandra, would you please introduce yourself and give a background?
Hi, my name is Lalandra, and sorry about the hiccups there. We're set up in our own studio, but I have a temporary one in the living room. So
living room, we have an office building.
Yeah, we're really professional here.
We're not surrounded by dogs.
I met Arn on christianforums.com way back in the 2000s, and he was arguing creation evolution there, and I was old Earth creationist teaching at a Christian school. I am just co-hosting here, so I'll take a back seat and every now and again chime in to add some cultural background, because I grew up very churched in the Southern Baptist Church, going to church 3 times a week, and on my mother's side in the Vietnamese Catholic Church, lived with nuns. So a lot of the culture, it doesn't, maybe from a literal reading of the Bible, it doesn't always come through what Christians think they mean. So also after that, I finished my bachelor's degree, and I have a master's degree in science writing. So my main focus is communication and education, and I've taught in a public school also for 7 years, science and language arts. So
yeah, my wife failed to mention that she was also raised in 2 religions, basically. I mean, she was raised with the Catholic nuns from the Vietnamese Catholic, and also she had like the other side of the family were Protestant, I think Baptist, and both sides of the family are telling her that the other side of the family are going to hell.
Because one side was Mary worshippers, and the other side were not christened at birth, so not Catholics.
Yeah.
Anyways.
All right, so we're going to inaugurate this first episode.
You get hell. You get hell. Everybody gets hell. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm going to inaugurate with a very strong stout, and I'm going to open with a quote from my favorite book that I think is relevant here. In the beginning, the universe was created. This has made a lot of people very angry and has been widely regarded as a bad move. That's from Douglas Adams' The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. All right, so Lawrence, you're gonna
never
begin
forget
the
your towel.
Thank you very much.
I mean, I can read whatever.
All right, I've got it open if we want to start.
All right, sure.
All right, I'm going to be going from the ESV. And this is Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was out without form, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Anybody want to discuss those first 2 verses?
Yeah. The best we can tell, the translation, because what you're the translation there, like, you know, it's really, really famous. In the beginning, blah blah blah, right? That should be translated as when from the Hebrew, which already implies that there were things existing, that there was already something going on. It wasn't at the very beginning.
Okay.
It's interesting because a lot of Christians will try and use that to say that the fact that the universe has a beginning is an argument for the Bible being true here, which of course they try desperately to avoid the fact that the beginning of the universe that science found is the Big Bang. So they try and kind of have their cake and eat it. But you will find all kinds of preachers going, in the beginning, God created, the universe had a beginning, so God made it, so the Bible was right, so blah, blah, blah. I would say it's a weak apologetic argument, but there are no strong apologetic arguments, so.
And I've read a number of different interpretations for what kind of a parable this first chapter was supposed to be. That in some senses, it won't become evident for a few more verses, but in one sense, we're looking at the world from the darkest before dawn, and then we see the light so that we can start to make out the shapes. Like if you're watching before the sun rises, but before dawn, you can be given the almost the shapelessness of the horizon. And then you begin to discern more and more things. You can see the plants appear. You can see the other things appear, and then eventually the sun becomes visible. That was another interpretation about how the story is being told.
Well, the literal-minded have to contort themselves to a remarkable degree to try and make this not a parable. One of the things I didn't mention about my infamous duct tape Bible. patent pending, is that I highlighted it according to the documentary Hypothesis, which I'm sure most people here are familiar with.
I've not heard of that. What is that?
Oh, yes. Well, it's now more known as the four-author theory, and it's a fairly foundational analysis, basically, of the composition of the Pentateuch, because the Pentateuch was compiled, I believe, by, was it Ezra or Nehemiah, on the way back from exile. Basically, the Persians let a lot of people go home as long as they formed subservient states, but they had to have a written code of law. So as best as we can tell, there was a compilation made of about 4 different sources. You've got the Yahwist source, which I've highlighted in yellow, which is the writings, whatever, surviving writings from the southern kingdom of Judah who worshipped Yahweh. You've got the Elohist source, which are surviving sources from the northern kingdom of Israel who worshipped primarily Elohim. Elyon, El is also the word for God. It's a whole thing. The Deuteronomist source, which is actually far more together than the others. The others tend to be very piecemeal and chopped up. And the Deuteronomist source was the scroll of the law that was found by that priest in the reign of the child King Josiah, who was totally under the thumb of that priest. We'll get to that eventually. And yeah, no, it totally wasn't composed by him. He found it in the wall. For realsies, guys. And then
now we know why you have a duct taped Bible.
Yeah, remember those mugs that say a Bible that's falling apart usually belongs to a life that isn't? Read it and weep, Christians. And then, of course, the priestly source is writings dating from during the exile to Babylon, which may have been, it may have been an attempt to integrate what they were learning in Babylon with their own mythology. It may have been an attempt to record some of the, what was done in the temple cult from someone who still remembered it while they were still alive. Because, like, what did we do? Everybody, we've been apart. It was all destroyed. How did this stuff happen? So we're reading Genesis 1 and 2, and Genesis 1 and the first little bit of 2, because the break here is incredibly stupid, is all from the priestly source. So this was written later than the Garden of Eden account. And this stuff is, I believe, sourced from the Babylonian mythology, where there were epochs written, one god would undertake a portion of creation and then sort of pass it on. And it was like those stories where I say a sentence, then you say a sentence. Apparently that's how creation was handled. So instead they took this, compounded it into the week to keep the idea of the Sabbath and, sanctify that as a holy concept. And it's definitely written in the style of Hebrew poetry with the sort of rhyming concepts. It was evening and morning the first day. It was evening and morning. There's kind of a flow to it.
Just one fun fact, if I may, and it was without form and void in chapter or verse 2. The Hebrew word tahom has a cognate that comes from Akkadian that looks very similar to the god we know, Tiamat, which was the archaic water deity that was, right there in the Akkadian Sumerian mythologies.
Right, and they cut her in half to make the universe.
Yeah, Marduk destroys her and uses the corpse to create the world. So that really happened, not the Genesis account. That really happened, though.
Obviously.
Wait, you're saying that Tiamat is real?
Tiamat's real, but not Genesis. No.
I mean, is formed out of the body of a bisected water dragon goddess really any more ridiculous than poofed out of nothing by magic?
No, that's what they think we believe.
Yeah, the projection is strong.
By the way, any of the is everybody here an atheist?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody here believe that everything came from nothing?
No.
Unless you have a very specific definition of nothing, that's some sort of Taoist, everything implies nothing, two sides of the same coin kind of thing. No.
Okay, I just
Even-
want to clarify that because I get sick of hearing it every goddamn
Yeah.
day.
Well,
that I
even cross
supposedly
doesn't
believe this
mean
thing I never
nothing.
believed.
Lawrence Cross doesn't mean nothing when he says
Yeah.
nothing. But of course, you know how that goes. So
Yeah, I got so
No, of
angry with
course.
him. I got so angry when he wrote that book. The first time I got to speak with Lawrence Krauss, I complained that he wrote a book that said the universe from nothing, which just means that I have to do more arguing, right? And says, well, so just to get back at you, we really did come from monkeys.
and just so everybody knows, Arn wanted us to just read verse 1 and verse 2 of Genesis, and that completes our entire biblical studies here. I don't think you need to read any further. We now know it's bunk, so let's move on. Have a nice life.
So I did want to point something out. So we were talking about the documentary hypothesis
Well-
earlier, and while it's super important to the history of biblical studies, it's been slowly kind of fading out over the past, I'd say 30 years or so. So with when it comes to the documentary hypothesis, it gives you a good baseline for how to view biblical composition. However, I mean, I fall into the supplementary hypothesis camp, which just puts them in a different order and a little bit later.
It is getting
Wellhausen's original
revivified,
thinking-
though. It is getting revivified. Joel Baden wrote a new, like, he kind of updated the documentary hypothesis, and it's starting to take off a little again. But I get
Yeah.
you. Either camp, there's a source problem that it's like, this wasn't written all at once by Moses.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
It's either way, like with the supplementary and the fragmentary hypothesis, like they can be understood within a framework. You have to remember, like, the Elohist source or the Yahwist source. We're not talking about a single author. We're talking about like a single source library, as it were. So it's like, they're good frameworks to understand the structure. They're not gospel.
Yeah.
If you don't believe in every word of the documentary hypothesis, you will not burn in monkey hell.
I've gotten notice that there are other biblical scholars that are interested in joining this show that couldn't be on today. But what I have already assembled here tells me that this is going to be a really fun series.
I am so excited.
Are we done with the first two verses?
Before we move,
Yeah, the universe is made out of water. For there were
Oh,
heavens
yeah,
from
yeah,
above.
hold
before
on.
we move on, Art often talks about, and Christians don't believe him when he says this, that the Bible pictures the universe kind of like a snow globe with water above the sky and water below. Now, if that's a metaphor, what's a metaphor for? And if it's literal, we know that doesn't make any sense. So how do there's from asking the people here, how do Christians make sense of that, or they just blow it off? Or it doesn't make sense, but
Well, I know when I was in a Bible elementary school and they replaced any kind of scientific understanding with doing flashcards of, the 7 days of creation from this, because I had to educate myself the Ben Franklin way. They would talk about the firmament as being the gap in the air between like the clouds above and the waters below, or something like that. That's not what firmament means. As Aaron points out so frequently, it's literally like a crystalline dome, and it's taken from these older Sumerian and Babylonian ideas, or Neo-Babylonian to be more precise. But obviously you can't teach children that now. You just look like a complete idiot. So you'll teach, if you're doing literal-minded creationism and not just being a sane Christian and saying it's a metaphor, then yeah, you'd say something like that, like it's the edge of the atmosphere above, or it's the gap in air between the clouds in the water above and the water below in the sea. Or if you're totally crazy like Kent Hovind, you imagine a giant dome of water that existed above the earth that turned it into the biggest greenhouse ever, and we all would have been dead, but magic.
I mean, how would Methuselah have lived so long, though? We know it had to be, right?
Right.
Oh, and then when we get into the thing about Methuselah, which I know this is going to come up in later episodes, but we're going to have to talk about how they used to measure time before they invented the number 0, back when these oldest books were written. And I'm not saying that Genesis is the oldest book. Lawrence will correct me on that. But when we talk about the older books, they were based on a sexagesimal numeric system where you count on your fingers, but in a different way than you think, because this finger counts for 3 and this finger counts for 3, and so on. There was a whole different system that the merchants had devised that wasn't based on the number 0. It was based on, and it wasn't a 10-based numeric system. It was based on 60. And the only way to explain what that means is to look at a clock.
It's still reflected in our clocks and in our 360 degrees.
And if you superimpose the Star of David over a clock, then you'll get a much better idea of the numeric system that they used. Lawrence just put his just face palmed. I saw it happen.
This is like whenever people talk about superimposing these things on top of each other, like modern creations with like old creations, I'm like, what's even going on here?
Well,
how would you explain that numeric system, the base 60? Because we know that it's a clock face. We know that the what is the Star of David also called Mogan David, right? We know that these are both like based on that numeric system, right? Both of them.
I mean, I'm not sure. I know that the 60 base system was around for a very long time, even before the Israelites, I think.
Cuneiform. Yeah.
No, there's a couple of interesting things about this. Now, scholars tell me that I'm wrong about the one thing that I propose on this that I think is so interesting. It's base 60, but there's a tiny mark that implies whether it's 6 or whether it's 60 or whether it's 600. Because it starts with 60, and if you add this one mark, which is, and remember, we're talking about something that is cast in mud. So it's very hard. It's very easy to misread this, and people had trouble translating this. So if you add this one mark, then 60 becomes 600. If you add this different mark, then it becomes 6, just the number 6. But that tells me, okay, 666. And so I'm thinking, but no, the Bible scholars know that has to do with Nero for reasons that you'll never understand. Well, we'll get to that later. But what's more important is that you can divide by lunar months on some occasions. So divide the number, the amount that's given by 12, or you can divide it by 10 in other instances. Unfortunately, there's not a single rule for this, but ultimately it works out that Methuselah was 75.
That would be very old then.
Yeah. But not impossibly stupidly old, like a millennium old.
Verging on a millennium. But then also, I've always thought, well, not always, obviously.
And Lawrence, if you don't correct me when I say something wrong, I'm going to lose respect for you.
I've always thought that the Jews just copied a lot of date lines from Sumerian and Babylonian sources, because if you look at any of the source material, there tends to be a lot of, oh, your guys did that? Well, my big brother can beat up your big brother. We did it more. In terms of stolen mythologies, in terms of stolen dates and numbers, and what archaeology has revealed about certain battles versus what the Bible says about certain battles. There is a lot of that in there. So when you get into dates, you have to take it in that spirit sometimes of, maybe we're just copying a list of grand heroes and putting our own people in, and they were totally better and badder, and they're the originals. And, and
speaking of spirit, I should have mentioned, I read verse 1 and 2 together. I should not have, because there was so much information that was just in verse 1 alone that talks about how the universe already existed. That God is only talking about, this one planet. And they don't have a concept of the other planets. There's like the whole universe is basically this one world. But, the earth was without form until God formed it. So there's something already exists. And the more important thing in the second verse, where it says that the Spirit of God moved over the face of the waters. Now, the Spirit of God, and there are many references that we will get to where spirit is air. So I just want to preface right at the beginning that
This is good.
People
Yeah.
didn't understand what air was. They didn't. They could feel the breeze. They could see the breath. They could see the clouds moving in the sky. And how impressive is that for people who think that somehow everything, including rocks, are inhabited by some kind of a spirit. But they knew that you would die if you can't breathe. So the breath of life, air. So when they're talking about the Spirit of God moving over the face of the waters, they're talking about the wind. They didn't know what wind was.
Aaron, on this, if I may, just an interesting note, and I'd love everybody to tell me if you agree with this or not. In verse 1, when it says created, God created the heavens and the earth. My research has led me to think, based on a lot of the academics, that create, when we hear that today, like we've been told by everybody, that means ex nihilo. And no, like your whole point is there's already water. It's hiding the earth. You know, there's already an existing thing, and it's just now, it's chaos. It's chaos, just like the Mesopotamian mythology. So now God is bringing order, which is why you find this chiastic structure of 7 days in Genesis, where he's now giving order to chaos. And of course, Tiamat, Tahom, was chaos. I mean, she was the chaos dragon. And here the god Marduk comes and, you know, faces her and boom, creates whatnot. It's not out of nothing. So the substance of existence and things are there. It's a real modern scientific thing to try and say, out of nothing, God created everything. What? No, it's like all the other mythologies. Go read them. And one fun fact I found out in Greek mythology, from what I understand, water was like, there is no something created water. Water always was, and I have not found a mythological god that like creates water. It's like water is this substance that always existed in some form in their mythology.
That
Just
is
something
true.
interesting.
That is true.
And if you compare that with what science has found out studying geology, that either this is starting at some thermal maximum where all the land is flooded and God clears the water off of it, like some major global warming happening here, or that it doesn't match, because like we have seen the formation of stars, new stars, bursts of stars, through comparing them from what we look at through telescopes, and it starts as an accretion disk around their sun, and rocks and dust slam into each other, and you get planets from that, from the gravity. Eventually, you get enough mass where this is why most massive objects are round like that, like the moon, and why they couldn't have predicted that the Earth wasn't flat, because you look at the moon, it's round, and maybe they think it's flat and round. I don't know, but it doesn't make sense from a scientific standpoint that the beginning stage of the Earth is water, because in order to create water, you know, everybody knows hydrogen and oxygen, and some people think comets brought the first water. Ice comets brought the first water to the Earth after that molten phase. Some people think volcanoes, some chemicals happen that way. So like, but the Earth being flooded with water in the beginning, or in maybe there are some periods in Earth's history geologically that the land was covered with water because of global warming events, but I don't think so. Not entirely. So I don't mean to be like so literal. It may be something to do with being
literal
autistic
is we had a super chat from Piao Meowner, who's pointing out that he lives in Texas as well, and you know, it's quite insane how the biblical literacy happens here, be it Conroe or Houston or Dallas, and there is this desperate drive to make it literally true and to contort interpretations into something that doesn't sound completely ridiculous. And it's something that a lot of believers feel obligated to do. And it's, if they just went, okay, it's a myth about creation and, and more accurate. But there are people who genuinely feel that if they do not find a way to make this scientifically true by whatever contortion necessary, that they are denying God and betraying the faith and deserve to be damned for all eternity.
Yeah, we're going to have to discuss at some point, because I'm never going to understand this, how people can demand that there must be absolute authority in this story, even when they know that it contradicts itself, even when they know that it can't be possible, even when they know that there's no way that a snake could talk.
Because if you say that, you're calling God a liar, and then
but why would you believe that this book that's obviously written by people, every page of it was written by people, why would you have to insist that it's got ultimate authority, even when you know that it can't?
Because that's what Protestants worship. They worship the Bible.
Yeah, I know. Bibliolatry. Yes, I'm sorry. I've been meaning to do this for a while. So yeah, Lilith mentioned this name, and I think she pronounced it much better than I'm going to. Piao Meow Noir offered $20, said, "Thank you so much, R and Raw, for bringing me out of Messianic Judaism and into the realm of reason that is atheism. And with me being 1 year as one, I've never been more happier and more free than before. Thank you so much." God, that is huge. That is...
Congratulations, Piao Meow Noir. Congratulations.
How do you say that name? You got to practice. Do you just stand in the mirror and say that over and over till you get it right?
No, I'm just weird.
Okay,
don't ask how I do things. I'm weird.
Yeah. Okay. So now somebody else said definitive mente no malo. Said, how do you know that it is a metaphor and not simply wrong understanding of the world? Why should we need to find sense instead of stating the obvious? I think we're going to be dealing with that question over and over and over again throughout this series. I've talked to a number of Bible scholars on this, including professors of biblical history, and they say that these were parables. And we're going to see a lot of this. I'm going to repeat this over and over again. That these were stories that were not meant to be taken literal. They were colorful. They were supposed to be taken with a grain of salt. These were just tales that people tell each other for kind of amusement. And so they knew that they were using parables, and the people who listened to the original recounting of these stories knew that they were hearing parables and could appreciate them for what they were. So rather than taking them all literally, they took them metaphorically. And that was the value that they had. And it was a grotesque perversion of them to take them all literally.
They should talk to the young Earth creationists then.
Yeah.
Well, the people that
have you talked to young Earth creationists, though? I mean,
no, Christians who say it's a parable should have a chat with the young Earth creationists who take it literally.
You can have a chat, but they're not going to listen because they're terrified of different perspectives. I mean, we both been there. It's something that was, I can't recall where I first heard this, but it was very interesting to me to think about the original purpose of myth, because in a pre-literate society or a largely illiterate society, which is what these societies were, there were like 3 guys who could read and write. If you had an idea that you wanted to preserve, there wasn't as much, I think, purely sort of free thought and just talk about concepts, because that doesn't translate as well into preserving an idea. If you die, your idea dies with you. So the way to preserve it is to tell it to the community. And the way to preserve it in the community's mind is to put it into a story that preserves the core. And over time, the little external, who's the hero of the story, whatever, that can change. That doesn't matter. The point is the core concept. And that's the function of myth, and was a very important and valuable function for hundreds of thousands of years of human history in terms of preserving any kind of more nuanced concept. But now, if we say something is a myth, we just mean a fairy tale, and bibliolaters, as you use the phrase, they can't take that. They see that as degrading the scripture. And, educated scholars obviously don't. And Jews as well. They have a history of arguing with their texts. But Christianity, particularly Protestant Christianity, broke away from the Catholic Church on the basis of we reject the authority of the Pope in favor of the authority of the Bible. And so their entire salvation is based on worshiping that book.
Ken Ham says that if you don't take all of Genesis literally, then you can't take the resurrection of Jesus and all of that literally.
Well, it's the foundation of original sin.
Yeah.
And then I always like to point out Ezekiel, who is very much anti-original sin in contrast to basically all the other prophets. Ezekiel's a fun one. Yeah, right.
The fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. No more will that be said in Israel.
I know that there was a second super chat that I somehow didn't see, or I thought that I didn't read earlier. Here it is. Another one from the same source. Piao Miao Noir. Piao Miao Noir. I'm going to get that eventually. $5 as someone who also lives in Texas. It's quite insane how the biblical literacy happens here, be it Conroe or Houston or Dallas. I get that. I hear people constantly telling me that the King James Version of the Bible is infallible, and the argument that they use for why it is infallible is that it hasn't changed since it was published. Because once something is published, you can't change it.
Which is basically the opposite of science.
The ISBN number system is the one true authority.
Coincidentally, I went to high school in Conroe ISD.
Oh.
So
my wife has horror stories about growing up in white supremacist Texas.
Yeah.
Oh God.
I mean, not to be an object of pity or anything, just for background.
Yeah.
No, it's a horror story. I have no doubt.
Yeah, my wife makes a very good point here that neither her nor I ever look at ourselves as victims at all. I mean, we see injustice, but mostly the injustice that we see is not what is visited against us, but what we see visited against other people. And so we want to advocate on behalf of other people, even when those people don't agree with us, like fundamentally. And I want to bring that up because I've seen an awful lot of political comments that anybody that doesn't agree with, like the norm in Texas politics is somehow a professional victim. No, we definitely are not. Neither my wife nor I. We are advocates for people who don't agree with us, but who still could use us as a champion.
I have never understood people who only care about an injustice when it happens to them.
Yeah.
I have never understood that.
Yeah. I'll never understand Americans either.
Speaking of a British person, I'm in the same boat.
Okay. Yeah. Do I have any other super chats to read? Because I don't want to lose my. Okay, there is one more. Uninstalling Windows. What a great name. €2. Just testing super chat feature. And one more after that. KD5681, $25. Thanks, Aaron, for all your teaching. Well, thank you very much. My name is Aaron, but okay, thank you very much for the $25. We've gone. Did we get
no malo? Definamente no malo, or people were willing to sacrifice their own firstborns because of metaphors? Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, well, that happened, and we'll get to that. Okay, so we've covered 2 verses, and I honestly don't think we've covered the first 2 verses adequately enough, but at some point we have to move on.
Oh, yes, because here we get to also the Big Bang in verse 3, depending on who you're talking to.
And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. So God said, abracadabra, I create as I speak, and a thing happens. And this, some people translate to mean the Big Bang. And ironically, the same people who say that the Big Bang is the evidence the universe had at the beginning also tell us that the Big Bang never happened.
Oh yeah.
And at this point, there's no sun yet.
No, well, darkness and light are physical things, and God is just, chucking one over his shoulder to the left and to the right, dark, light, dark, light.
Yeah, I just noticed a note about Ben, who joined our panel after we began. Ben, introduce yourself, please.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought I already did. No, I go by the amateur exegete.
We did do that. I'm sorry. You showed up in a different order.
Yeah, but
after Peter dropped out, and it showed up in a different order, and then somebody commented that they didn't know who you were. I apologize.
No, a couple things real quick. So just on verses 1 and 2, this is the P source, and Lilith already talked about this. But that Ruach Elohim in verse 2, the Spirit of God, the Wind of God. When you read other parts of the P source, specifically Genesis chapter 8, that phrase, that Ruach, comes up again. Because Genesis 1 is creation, and Genesis 8 is the middle of the Noah story, the end of the flood. It's the recreation. And it's important to know this because P, the priestly source, is very methodical. He is very careful with what he says, and you can see this further when you read the book of Leviticus, because Leviticus is almost entirely P. It's almost entirely the priestly source. So when you read Genesis and you read this methodical evening and morning, God said this happened. You need to keep in mind this is somebody who's writing for a ritualistic system that we have no familiarity with. We're just not used to that kind of thinking. And also in verse 4, when God says, "Let there be light," the reason it's not connected to the sun is because they didn't believe that the light you see that lights up the daytime came from the sun. They didn't think that. They believed light was its own thing, and that the sun, which is created on day 4, was meant to govern the daytime, not to produce light for the world. And the reason you know this is because you can see the sky is blue, right? Even when the sun's covered by a cloud, and that's because beyond the sky, beyond the firmament, is an ocean of water. So to light that up, there must be light beyond that, and that's what the Genesis author probably believed about his world, that there was light beyond the firmament, and that we can see things even when the sun's darkened. We can still see the world because light does not come from the sun. We know it does, but they didn't think that.
Yeah, we'll discover more about the wind of God when we come to the verse that says, "And the Lord said, 'Pull my finger.'"
I think Dark Matter 2525 did that one, didn't he?
I do want to say, guy did like Light in the Fort.
I like Ben's thinking here. Ben, I like your thinking because that is my whole mission. I think we're all on a path of trying to understand what they meant. And when we do that, the people who give atheists kind of a fight are the ones who are interpreting it in ridiculous ways. But when we all can go, okay, yeah, they were old, ancient thinking. We didn't really know what we know now. Whoop-de-doo. Like, so what? We're not using this as our guidebook, infallible, going around beating people over the head with it, things like that, telling people how to live their lives. I like the way that Ben's thinking here because that's my whole purpose. I'm not here to mock the Bible. I'm here to understand it. And if anyone isn't really grasping what it meant and they're doing silly, ridiculous things with it, in effect, they're the ones mocking themselves by not actually grasping the concepts that was actually being meant here. And the luminary of the moon, we didn't even talk about. That's its own light. So it's like it has its own radiance, if you will, that's coming from that, which we know is a reflection of the sun they didn't even get. So there's just so many things there. I do want to make one mention, though, as we're going into this Let There Be Light and just this Genesis 1 thing. If you look at the Noah's flood, it almost looks like a retelling of the creation. It's like another reflection. And when we get to Lot and his 2 wives, daughters, if you will, that he ends up having babies with, which is a whole fun story. They didn't think anyone existed in the land. There were no men, so they had to sleep with their dad. Is this another end of the world destruction, but by fire? There are some scholars who think so.
Actually, Second Peter, because I had running in my head from a lecture by Richard Carrier, where he was talking about the apocalypse, and in 2 Peter where it says, but they willfully forget that there were heavens from of old and an earth compacted out of water. But these same are now reserved for fire, because there was the world compacted out of water in the first 2 verses. The water was essentially the atoms that formed the world. God, Platoed water into the earth because reasons, I have no idea. And then destroyed that earth with water. And then, of course, by the time 2 Peter gets around, that's, that we all know that's inauthentic. And you've got later Christians writing about the apocalypse by fire that they are anticipating with the lake of fire and the fiery comets. But on a lesser scale, yes, you have that thing with Sodom and Gomorrah and the, apocalypse of fire, which, because God loves a loophole and he said he'd never drown us again.
Yeah, he'll burn us next time.
But the other thing with Noah's Ark, with the whole Noah flood story, where in Genesis 1, he's dividing the waters. It says the waters came from above and from below. So it's essentially reversing the situation.
Oh, yes. I'll get into that.
If you think of it in a way, it might make some rudimentary sense to think that there's water above the sky because they observed rain. And where's that rainwater coming from? Above
windows in the firmament.
Windows. There you go.
Yeah, the sky is blue. The sky is blue like water, so that's where the water is.
Too.
Where the water is.
And I think it's important to introduce the scientific perspective, not to say, look at those Bronze Age goat herders, they're so ignorant, but in a way to say, because I was raised by someone who literally believed every word was literally true. And they teach their children this. So I think the scientific perspective, in contrast to what it says, is still important for people out there who are raised that way too, is it still happens. Like I don't want to get too far ahead in the verses. My stepmother said she didn't believe there were aliens because there were no aliens in the Bible. So every word is to them a science book, textbook.
This is going to be so much fun when we get to places where they could be talking about aliens. And we need to remember what Lalandra just said here to recognize the contradictions from one place to from another.
Oh yes, it's aliens. Yeah,
of course.
I'm not saying it's aliens.
I'm not saying
but it was aliens.
Hey guys, I've got a roll of my scholar friends pulling up. Thank you so much for the time. Let's continue this.
Hey, it was great having you on. I hope to see you again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Take care, guys.
Well, now that guy's finally gone. Okay. All right. So we did the thing about how God is, how air is spirit, how everything already, or most things, the earth and water certainly already existed. Like right from the moment that God began creating, there was the Spirit of God hovering over the waters. The waters already existed much, so the heavens that we understand today must have already existed, though they haven't been populated with anything visible yet. And now when God says, let there be light, we're not talking about the sun. We've just done in an hour 3 verses.
We're going to have to pick up the pace at some point, because I don't think I can talk for an hour on why the Levites needed to have a blue thread around the edge of their robe.
We'll get there. I know we all have our favorite things to jump on, and I do, but we'll get there. Let me try to do verse 4. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. I'm going to do another verse. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day.
I was going to mention as well that, Arvin, when you were doing the Qur'an, they were actually talking about, the guy you had on with you was talking about the fact that light and darkness were actually a separate thing from the sun as well, in their way of saying things, that the sun was actually, God was moving the sun to match the light, or moving the light to match the sun, or which are.
I know that light was often it was connected with an idea of heavenly glory. So it appears to have had a spiritual element to how it was perceived as well. Although I don't know about the idea of God moving the light with the sun. It does seem so obvious, but
I have to read some more super chats. Super chat from
yes.
Joseph Thompson, $9.99. The Mormons I live with claim that the Bible is true 100%, along with their Book of Mormon is true 100%, and they literally believe all in the nonsense. I'm enjoying this new series already. Well, thank you very much for that. My wife and I were last week, we were in London watching the Book of Mormon in one of their London theaters. If you guys haven't seen it, it was worth a watch. That was hysterically funny. I was raised Mormon, or I was raised by a Mormon family. I never identified as Mormon, and I remember my mother told me that when I was 14 years old and I was criticizing Mormonism, she said, "You haven't even studied Mormonism. Well, that makes you a hypocrite. You're criticizing something you don't know about." And I had to admit that at 14, I said, "You know what? You're right. That if I'm criticizing something I don't know about, you're right. That makes me a hypocrite. So bring over your Mormon missionaries and we'll have that talk." And so she did. She brought over a handful of teenagers called elders because Mormons don't know what words mean. And we had a hysterical conversation. So you're telling me that God has a physical body. He exists everywhere and everywhen throughout the known multiverse, but his arms only reach this far. And he has nipples.
Hey, thrones are built for asses.
God has lungs. So where does he use this body? Does he keep it under a tarp in the garage? I mean, like does he only break it out, on Sundays to go down to the drive-in? I mean, what's the purpose of having a physical body here? I had a hilarious conversation with the Mormon missionaries, and talking about how if you get married in the temple to a woman who is also in the temple, and you both live saintly lives. Yeah, this is interesting. You both live saintly lives, then you, the man, will get your own planet, with all the wives you can eat.
And she gets to be one of them.
Yeah, and so she gets to now wait in line. It's very much the Mormons and the Muslims have an awful lot of similarities here, because the wife that you had in life, or the wives that you had in life, get to wait in line behind the teenager you just hired for wife number 7.
They see us as livestock.
Livestock.
But so much for Joe Destu's part, really.
Yeah, exactly. So what does the wife get out of any of this? Is there ever a situation where there is a planet bequeathed to a woman? But no. Only men get planets.
Okay.
And only
I'm
going
to interject because I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. I know, but this is my namesake, Lilith. Okay. Because the myth of Lilith, and this is something we'll get to just in the next few verses. The first version, it talks about man and woman being created together. And the second, we have the whole thing with the rib and Eve. The myth is that Lilith was the wife created at the same time as Adam and equal to Adam. And when Adam wanted to be on top and wanted to say, I am the man and you must submit to me because I'm man, she wasn't having it. And so she spoke the name of God, which has magical properties, and therefore gained the ability to fly, whereupon she flew off to the head rivers of the Euphrates and started having orgies with angels.
I thought it was demons. I read that it was demons.
At that, you kind of they're the same thing at that point. The fallen angels, but they're still hot at this point. They're not all scaly and
fallen
gross.
Angels.
Yes, Samael and such.
Yeah, that's so my porn fixation.
So then Adam goes crying to God like a little bitch and says, "Make her come back and do what I says." And God sends angels to Lilith, and Lilith tells them to fuck off because She is not going back to that lame ass at this point. We are having way too much fun for that. And so there's a whole negotiation where the angels are going to kill her demon children, and it's actually very
I don't
sad.
want to get ahead of ourselves because I know
it's
that
not in the Bible text. That's the only reason I brought
know
it
that
up
when we
now.
get to Genesis 3, Lilith is going to come up a lot more. Including, you know, where she does sneak back into the garden.
Some interpretations.
So, yeah, the Lilith thing. I remember a year, probably a couple years ago now. I did a project on Lilith, and the whole story that that you listed off. That is what happens in the story, but the story is from an ancient Jewish parody. So I don't think it was ever meant to be an actual interpretation. I think the author of the Alphabet of Ben Sira, which is where that work is from, was making fun of rabbis. I think he was making fun of how rabbis like kind of twisted things to make their own interpretations. Like if you read the rest of the Alphabet of Ben Sira, it's hysterical. It is so funny. Like just some of the best work I've ever read. And it's, to me, it's like this guy is obviously making fun of rabbis because he's pulling.
And he may very well have been, but it's not very off for the character of Adam. But we'll get into that in chapter 3.
Yeah, I just want to add that Dante, when he wrote Inferno, didn't realize that he was writing Christian scripture.
He was really just insulting the Pope. He didn't think they were going to take it all literally.
Okay, so anybody want to move on to the next verse, or should we already?
Well, it seems like we've actually referenced this. Oh, we do.
Oh, yes, you're right. I apologize. So Joseph Thompson for $9.99. The Mormons I live with claim that the Bible is true 100% along with
we did that one.
Did I read that one? I read that one.
We did.
Okay, I apologize. Superjet Sean Alexander for $20. Thank you, Aaron, for being a huge influence in helping me shake the God myth. Also, as fellow member of the Satanic Temple, hail Satan, and a big fan of Star Trek, I hail Satan on all subspace frequencies. Thank you very much for that. And I'm going to go through every other super chat that I can see at the moment. Robert Lawrence, $20, gave no message. Well, thank you very much, Robert Lawrence. And then we have another super chat for. I'm gonna wait. Okay, you got that one. For too much mushrooms. I really want to know how he happened across that name. For £10, he says, I just wanted to say Aaron Raw looks a lot like Governor Ratcliffe from Pocahontas. Yeah, well, yeah. Okay, loved your Qur'an series. Super chat for the Sinister Porpoise, $2. Can we have Apostate Book of Mormon study too? That would be a hoot, wouldn't it? We'll do that one after the Bible. Okay, and by the way, I want to give credit to my wife for this because a lot of my better ideas were actually her ideas, and it was her idea that we do the Bible lessons. And I wasn't with a lot of them, you know, I don't really feel it right away. Like, is this really a good idea? Let's test this out. But on this first episode with the people that have already assembled, and I know the names of the people that want to be on in subsequent episodes, I have very high hopes for this series. I think it's going to work out very well. So, Mr. Monster gives $5. I'm curious about Christians who don't take the Bible literally. Why are they still Christian? Are they too attached? I want to give some defense for Christians who, for whatever reason, I mean, they advocate evolution. They're trained in genetics and so forth, and in paleontology. They know that evolution is a real thing. They know that the Earth is not 6,000 years old, that it is, in fact, billions of years old. They know that life, that multicellular life is, in fact, hundreds of millions of years old. They still try to compartmentalize their theology. I don't know how they do that. I don't know why they do that, but I want to give some credence that there are people who are not so extreme.
Well, they have a higher and more mature concept of God as well.
That is true. Yeah.
It's important to understand, and it infuriates me when atheists are like, you have to be a young earth creationist or you're not a true Christian. I'm like, dude, no, stop it. But at the same time, like, they have a concept of God that is of a much higher order. They do. And it's much more mature. It's much more refined. And they understand salvation. And there's elements to it that I think they don't always understand. And that's where faith comes in, is that it's part of this broader narrative. And, it means a very different thing to them. So what you deal with creationism is a very childish understanding. And I think it's important to give credit to people whose religion is more adult.
Yeah, if you've ever argued with the difference in arguing with a young earth creationist biblical literalist versus someone who is actually trained in the science, accepts that the earth is old, accepts that whether the Big Bang happened with a singularity or not, we know that there's some cosmogony of some sort in our distant past. When they accept the science just basically in total, but they also integrate this theology with it, it's very difficult to argue with those people. But when you're talking about biblical literalists, it's like you can knock down the whole house of cards because that's all it is, and they'll simply refuse to acknowledge that their house of cards has fallen down because they don't have a concept of logic.
Yeah. I'd like to weigh in on that because I was an old earth creationist and I didn't immediately become an atheist after I realized that humans are apes and such. I went to theistic evolution, and this is what we're talking about. And other people online would be like, if I were going to be a Christian, it would be because of people like you, theistic evolutionists. Y'all are cute and cuddly and whatever and nice.
Cute
not
and
mean,
cuddly.
not like young earth creationists, not mean, Yeah. But I abandoned that too because it's like you are complicit in all the evil that Christianity does. Not just where they're taking the Bible literally to consider homosexuality an abomination, but the institution. Churches they hide abuse. I don't want to sound like a victim, but I live with nuns, and the mean nun thing was totally true in my life, with nuns with whips and the whole 9 yards. So
don't cause me other fantasies.
I don't want to be complicit.
I'm sure there's a website on that.
I feel like they don't mean to, but putting a bow on something that's horrid all the way through is not necessarily you being nice.
Yeah. And there is a tendency for a lot of people to view Christianity as one homogenous sort of group, when really and truly there are so many different threads. It's like I actually went to a Church of England school, so the way I was taught about religion, Genesis and a lot of what happened in Genesis, you were told, oh well, that's just kind of allegory. It's not a literal thing. And we were taught science, and that was kept very separate. And we were told, yeah, the Bible says this, but it's not a literal thing. It is just a way of understanding God.
The truth about the truth is an excuse I've heard.
I get that, and I'm here for that. Even the Catholic Church accepts evolution as science. And there are a lot of really great Catholics, even cultural Catholics, just like they're cultural Jews, that don't believe in any of it, but they want the community. But in my opinion, as much as I've seen of it, that I think because the books it's based on, that Christianity, I think the people that are in it and being the good Christians need to find another outlet for being good. Because you're putting a bow on something. I mean, that's just my personal opinion, but you don't have to agree with me.
All right, I want to mention that when we did the Qur'an lessons, And I realized that we were focused on a Western audience when we did those Quran lessons. We would get between 100 and 200 viewers. And on this first episode talking about the Bible, we are over 600 viewers. So a Western audience focusing on the Bible, yeah, it's getting a lot more attention than we previously got. I have another couple of super chats that I have to read, and I apologize to everyone who I value your input more and more by the minute, but I do have to read these. So super chat from Tariq Sharif, who AED. I'm trying to remember what currency that is, and I'm guessing Dubai. I can't remember. For 100, whatever they are, dinar, I don't know. This channel will be a compliment to friendly atheists. Everything wrong with the Bible. Great work. Watch most of the Quran version. Thank you very much for that. And I also have to thank Hammett Mehta of the Friendly Atheist for giving me a link to what's going to be my next video, which was the Arizona Senate talking about gun control, where I listened to a number of the senators talk about how they put God and guns as untouchable by law, and they put faith above family. So there's a definite distortion of values there. And we have another super chat from Tom Christensen for I think this is Danish kroner, 45 Danish kroner. Hello from Denmark, Himmerland. Isn't religion just wishful thinking? I mean, something for the ones that are afraid of dying. I think that's largely correct. Not entirely, but largely, yes. And then I have another super chat. This is for Mysterious Monolith for £5. £5 is not much, but thank you for everything you do, RN Raw and friends. Thank you very much for that. And then I know I'm taxing my producer by jumping to so many different names right after one another. Let's see, another super chat from Trude Hell for what is NOK? Is it North Korean? What is NOK? I forget. 20, whatever that currency. Oh, I'm sorry, Norwegian kroner. Thank you. I feel so stupid. North Korea. What was I thinking? Norwegian kroner. Hit that like button. And then we have for I'm really going to tax Peter for like trying to grab all these so quickly. Caden Pat, $9, or what I'm thinking is $9.99. What about liberal churches which accept LGBTs and are pro-choice? Are they okay? Are they okay? They're the few churches we have that are not grossly defective. Are they okay? That's an interesting notion. Do you accept all of your parishioners, or do you just hate certain ones?
This was what I was talking about also, and I wanted to break it down here a little bit more, because we're going to be going through the Bible, and you'll see why that you should not base a belief system on this book, I think. But the Methodist Church, we've been to a Methodist church in Austin that was welcoming to atheists, LGBT friendly, had a rainbow flag prominently displayed on the church. And I don't want to lump in all Methodists, and Methodists are generally seen as nicer than Baptists, but kind of a little bit Baptist. And anyways, my own child went to a Methodist church when they were exploring religion, but they're so nice and everything, and the pastor was really nice. But years later, he accidentally told one of the parishioners he was gay, and of course they fired him because the Bible says homosexuality is an abomination. And if I'm not mistaken, the Methodist doctrine is that you can't be a pastor if you're homosexual. No matter how accepting some churches, Methodist churches are, or some Methodists are, you're still basing on a. And I don't mean to harp on LGBTQ. There are other really huge moral failings with the Bible that nobody should be carving pieces of it out and saying, okay, well, I just believe in Jesus. He was really nice. He was a hippie or whatever. You know, it's for me. It's like abandon it and let's do something else now.
I think, if I may, this is the question of anti-theism. There are some forms of Christianity and some forms of every religion that are obviously harmful and killing people and just terrible, terrible, terrible evil. Obviously, look at the evil, it's right there. But the fundamental question is there a form that is not harmful? And I can see individuals who do not take it literally, for whom these stories become a matter of informing their perspective. Certain forms even of Eastern religions and that sort of thing. But ultimately, I think I have to side with you and say that I don't think that it's ever going to not be harmful. It's because you have something corrupt at the root, and it will keep blossoming out. Someone will read this damn book and take it seriously, and then the whole world goes to hell again. It's happened before, it will happen again. Other people have a different perspective, and I certainly want to work with good Christians, kind Christians, accepting Christians on, counteracting extremism and the Christian dominionist ideology. But ultimately, I am not convinced that any form of it will ever be anything other than diluted poison. And I'm willing to discuss that, and I'm willing to defend my perspective on it. That whether or not those churches are okay, Kate and Pat, is something you're going to have to figure out for yourself where you stand on.
I have to throw in there the very last time that I had canvassers, for religion showing up at my door, there was a pair of Jehovah's Witnesses, one old lady, one young woman, and they were trying to argue with me that there was, that there was good and value to be found in the Bible. And I said, yeah, but it's just lipstick on a pig, isn't it? I mean, the very best, you might be able to find one line that, taken out of context, that one line will make a nice t-shirt or bumper sticker. But when you read it with the rest of the context of the paragraph from which it came, you realize that it's all horrific. And
I like Ecclesiastes and half of Proverbs. That's it. The rest is garbage.
Ecclesiastes, that's the best.
Yeah.
So good.
I have to agree with Lawrence on that one. That is absolutely hands down. That it's like the only source of wisdom in the entirety of the Bible.
Yeah, nothing matters. It's great. I love
There's nothing new under the sun.
Yep.
But
All right, I'm going to try to read
Sorry.
the last of the super chats that I've got. Did I do? Okay, we did the liberal churches, and so now we have Constellation Pegasus for $4.99. Did anyone here consider Jehovah's Witnesses when their faith in God was being challenged? I did. I mean, when I was a young man raised by a Mormon family, and I was living in a kind of a commune with another guy who was a Jehovah's Witness, and we were out trying to apply for jobs, and so we want to look presentable for our job applications. And so we realized that he and I were both on 10-speed bicycles. We're both wearing white dress shirts with little name tags on us. He's a Jehovah's Witness. I'm supposedly a Mormon. We found a great deal of irony in that. Neither of us believed in our doctrine at all. We were both, we both smoked dope and drank and all of everything you do as a young man. But here we are on bicycles looking like we're a pair of missionaries. And we thought that was hysterical. We have another super chat. Let's see, this one. No, we do have a couple of messages from Diana. Diana, I don't know if you have any expertise in the Bible. Would love to have you on again. Miss you. But she says, congrats on the new episodes. I am sad I couldn't join you at the last episodes, but good luck. Thank you very much for that. I have a lot of respect for Diana. She lives in a very trying situation.
Lavender Lady?
Diana was a part of our Qur'an lessons.
Oh.
Yeah, and so she was calling in from a war-torn country wherein they very often didn't have electricity.
Yes.
Where she would be having to call in from a private generator, and of course she couldn't use her camera.
No.
Because she can't bear to be recognized.
No.
Her situation was a lot more real than most American Christian victims of modern society can even deal with.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that she's checking in and that she's well, and much respect, Diana. You are well named for a warrior goddess.
Yes, indeed. All right, so I think I'm done with the chats, and we're very near the end of this first episode because I agreed with Lawrence that we would make this a 90-minute episode for the first time.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't sure how many people exactly we're gonna be there. So like, I mean, you can obviously keep the show going as long as you want. It's your channel. But yeah, in about 10 minutes, I do have to head out.
All right, Lawrence, I want to keep this going regular. I want you to be a regular co-host. I do.
Love to,
yeah. I totally respect that you need to leave early, and you're welcome to do that. But when I set this show up, when I agreed with my wife that I would do this series, it was with the expectation that you would be the primary co-host.
I appreciate that. But yeah,
because Lawrence, if the audience doesn't recognize, Lawrence does his own show of Bible lessons and has been doing for years. He doesn't have quite the following that we do because he's criminally undersubscribed for this show. So if we will try to give me a link as soon as this is done. I will add this. I will add your link to your show, your regular show in the description below. And thank you very much for your participation, sir.
All right, yeah. So I can still be here for a little bit, although
I vote for keeping it at 90 minutes also because there's some meat in the next chapter.
Meat in the next chapter. We're 4 verses into this one.
I know. Well, we were just getting to know each other, so
yeah,
that's true.
We can be a little more on topic next time.
We should set a goal for the next one. We will see if we can break 4 verses.
Well, it's not like we have to rush. It's not like there's a deadline.
Have you seen the size of this book?
Yes.
Yeah.
It took me 4 years to read the Qur'an, and that's a pamphlet compared to the Bible.
Yeah. The Bible is quite the slog. In fact, today, in about an hour, a little over an hour now, we're going to be doing our 244th episode.
Yes.
Oh my word!
How far are you?
We are just starting John.
Do you realize that means I will be dead of old age before I finish this series?
Yep, there's a good chance of that.
We're just gonna have to push you through, Aaron.
Aaron, please.
Aaron, I'm sorry. I heard myself say it. I was like, damn it.
All right, so I'm going to leave. We got 6 minutes left. I want everybody to make closing statements, if you would. Oh, wait, we got one more super chat. Look at that. Cyber Hex for $10. Hello, Aaron. Thanks for people like you and your guests and Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Carl Sagan, and a geology degree, etc., to help educate people. I don't know what the geology degree refers to. I will make a public announcement that I just got confirmation from my university 2 days ago that I have just completed the degree requirements for my Bachelor of Science in Anthropology from the School of Human Evolution and Social Change at the Arizona State University's Institute of Human Origins. I, Aaron Ra, named after the sun god, am a sun devil. So
don't you mean
and a Satanist?
Aaron
Go
Ra?
figure. I'm sorry, Lawrence, what did you say?
I was making a joke. Don't you mean Aaron Ra? No,
All right, and don't forget, Lawrence, to give me the link to your show so I can refer people over to that.
All right. I'll pull that up right now.
Okay, in the last 5 minutes, anybody else have any closing statements?
Go ahead, Lawrence.
Yeah, my only closing statement was I think the Bible is honestly a fascinating set of works. It was the amount of people, the amount of time that it took to eventually compile this thing, It's crazy. And the amount of manuscript differences, the amount of biblical archaeology that has been done, it all puts it into such a cool perspective. And I think, I don't think books of this age could really be read without commentary. They can't be understood, I should say, without commentary, because you need that context. If you don't, if you lose that historical or even narrative context, you're just not going to get the meaning. So I think that shows like this are necessary for actually understanding it. I know that plenty of Christians do Bible studies, but from my experience, they are usually not as in depth. Especially because when was the last time a church, like a preacher, told you, "Oh, hey, this translation is wrong, and I'm gonna read from the Greek to prove it"? Probably never. So I mean, we do that on my show a lot, and I am dropping the link in chat for the show, by the way.
And I will include that for those who are watching after it's live. That will be in the description.
Yeah. So yeah, starting John, how fantastic is that? But if you I would say that the one difference between this show and my show is that we do get done with chapters. So you can join us for that. We have like a whole bunch of commentaries. We go as in depth as we can while trying to remain interesting. And we do get through the chapters eventually. Sometimes it goes longer than other times, but I think it is an in-depth study.
Excellent. So it looks like we're going to be about 3 or 4 months on chapter 1.
No. We could figure out some way to structure it, like maybe after the reading everybody gets 2 minutes and then anybody can break out after that. And they can pass their 2 minutes,
I agree with that, in embryo, but I know that there's an awful lot of discussion in some of these verses. There's going to require some interaction.
That's true. Like break out after everybody's had a 2 minute or past their 2 minutes.
And I want to thank my wife for having come up with this idea. It seemed so obvious, and the strange thing is that I didn't want to do it at first because Lawrence was already doing it.
Yeah, I'm the first person to invent Bible studies. Nobody else did Bible studies but me.
I appreciate your contribution, Lawrence.
I'm really excited to hear about your channel, and I'm looking forward to going through the Ben Sirach stuff, because that is one thing I don't have on my shelf.
Alphabet of Ben Sirach. It's so good. We do a reading of it on the show. It's in a few episodes, but it's really, really gold. It's just so funny.
And if you're ever in Milwaukee and you're interested in smoking from a hookah, go have a conversation with my friend Lawrence.
I will absolutely do that.
Although Lilith, I think you might like the Lilith video I made. If you
I
haven't seen
probably will.
Yeah, Lilith and Myth and History. I think it's good stuff.
JB, do you have anything to say?
Did you mean me, JR?
Oh, JR, sorry. I have a very small, it's very small, and I can't read very well on it. It's squished.
I was waiting for Aaron.
Okay.
Yeah, like when I started doing my books, one of the things that I said from the beginning is that part of it is actually to encourage people to read the Bible. I said, you try to determine which parts of actually, like which fucked up stuff comes from me and which stuff is original to the Bible. And people have a very hard time telling the difference, basically. So I think it is really, it's a fascinating topic. And if my books help to get other people to like read up on it and say, well, where does this come from? I think that's a bonus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you very much for that.
And I just want to say, I know I talk too much sometimes, and please just feel free to interrupt me because I get excited.
I've
and I ramble.
valued everything you've said so far, so
Well,
I don't
thank
think that's going to be a problem.
I'm very glad. I've been a huge fan of your work for so long, Aaron, and it really helped me to recover from not just my indoctrination, but the gap in my knowledge that was left by my indoctrination. And I've had to fight my way through a lot of things to get the knowledge back that I should have had, but I didn't. I had too many mental blocks. I had whatever. And I think in looking through the Bible, I'm really excited because there are so many dirty secrets I know that a lot of people don't pick up on, and I'm excited to bring those out as we come to them. But also, I think it's important to remember that religion is a thing evolved, and you can see it in the text, and you can see it in the history of Christianity, that the thought has evolved, that certain ideas have propagated not because of their truth value, but because of their value in perpetuating and sustaining the religion itself. And that sometimes it's tough to see that when you're close to it, but that it's an important part of understanding, understanding this text and understanding how it's affecting what's going on in the world. And it's a matter of some urgency that we understand the latter, because things are not going well. So I hope this is helpful.
Yeah. Anybody else got a final comment? Otherwise, we are slightly over time, and I want to let Lawrence get off to his other show.
Well, I really appreciate you having me and you even considering me to do this.
Considering you. This show depends on you.
I doubt it. You guys seem to carry it pretty well. So,
okay.
The only other comment I have would be, first of all, thank you for having me. And also, my younger sister, when she heard that I was going to be on with Arvin Raw, said I was a bitch. Because in her words, Arvin is awesome.
In fairness, I would say the same thing if I was your sister. Like, you son of a...
Quit blowing smoke up my ass. Okay. I very much appreciate everybody that was assembled here today, the people that have already had to leave, the people that need to leave momentarily. This was a brilliant first episode, even though we only went 4 verses into it. I think this bodes well, actually. And I'm hoping that everybody can reassemble on the 12th. And Lawrence, are we good for 11 Central to begin?
Yeah, that's totally fine with me.
Very good, very good. Then that's what we'll shoot for. Thank you very much, everybody. And Peter, go ahead, take us out.